How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
We need to talk about a conversation I had on stage at the gathering this weekend. It was the one that pretty much everyone in the room was most bothered by. No, they weren't like mad. It was deeply troubling. I want to introduce you to a group. Wound up sponsoring part of the gathering, Michael Lucci. So, okay, side note. So I'm on an email list with some really smart people. I'm the dumb guy on the list. And one of the guys on the list is named Michael Lucci. And so I'm at the gathering this weekend. There's a guy on stage named Michael Lucci. Well, don't even put two and two together that this is the same Michael that I'm on this email list with. Just assume it's a different guy. Only after we're over, it's like, hey, we're on the email list together. We've exchanged emails. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm a complete idiot. Michael Lucci runs a group called State Armor, statearmor.org. And essentially what State Armor is doing is they've realized this: the federal government is slow to move on the substantive threats about China, but states can move quickly. So they've been going into states around the country and explaining the national security threat from China to the states. I want to give you an example of one way China is making incursions into the United States already. Some of you I know are recipients of organs, or someone who has received a new kidney or a new lung or a new liver. I know people on that list. One of the things that China does, I did not realize China did. I mean, I've heard that China did this, but we now have an interview cropped up last week before the gathering with a Falun Gong dissident. China carved out a piece of this guy's liver and one of his lungs and put it on the market for donation, for organ transplant. That's what they do. They harvest the organs of dissidents. You can survive without one of your two kidneys. And so China will take one of your kidneys. You can survive without one of your two lungs. And so China will take one of your lungs. Your liver grows back. So China will slice out a portion of liver for transplant. For the people who get the death penalty in China, they'll take your heart for transplant. I had no idea that really did happen. People are coming forward who've escaped China, who actually are missing organs because they were dissidents and China was taking portions of their organs for transplant. So one of the pieces of legislation State Armor is advocating for is to ban medical services from reimbursement for organs from China. Interestingly enough, Katie Hobbs, the governor of Arizona, vetoed that legislation. Most states are passing that legislation. And what it does is it discourages China from organ harvesting. But one of the big focuses for State Armor right now is stress testing. So right now, as you and I are talking here, China's at war with us, and we're not at war with them. What the Chinese are currently doing, from my conversation with Michael Lucci and also Brian Cavanaugh. Brian Cavanaugh works for another group. He works with Robert O'Brien. Brian Cavanaugh, who was on stage, was the highest ranking career national security person within the National Security Council for the president. So when Robert O'Brien, for example, the president's national security director, didn't want to travel with the president, Brian Cavanaugh had to travel with the president. And he was talking to me before we got on stage that the political appointees were deeply suspicious of him to begin with because he was a appointee. And he's like, yeah, I mean, he gets the whole deep state suspicions, but He actually was very much a conservative and wound up earning their trust. So Brian Kavanaugh, he and Michael Lucci talking about these threats to China on stage. One of the things they were talking about is right now the Chinese are putting malware into water treatment facilities, pipeline transmission computer programs, and the power grid, so that they can, at the flip of a switch, begin to shut down our power grid, our water supply, our water treatment facilities, and our oil and natural gas pipelines. Remember the Colonial Pipeline hack? It turned out to be a hack for money. Those hacks could actually be malicious for state sponsors. So, for example, when China decides to invade Taiwan and we begin to mount a response, China pushes the button on the computer and our lights go out, our water stops running, and our natural gas stops flowing as a way to discombobulate this country to make it harder for us to mount a response. It's happening right now. It is happening right now that China is doing this. So one of the things that State Armor is proposing by way of executive order or stress test or by way of executive order or legislation is a stress test that your state has to do a complete diagnostic of its power grid, its pipeline grid, and its water grid to make sure that in the event of a Chinese national security disruption that the state will survive. And a number of states, including Georgia, have now begun doing these stress tests just to make sure. One way to fight back against China, because China, by the way, is fighting this war with us right now. One way to fight back is to respond in kind and show we're doing the steps that need to be taken to make sure we're secure. One of the most troubling things that came up on stage, though, they were talking about the port of Savannah. So about 2.5, 3 hours from me is the port of Savannah, Georgia. It is a port that is on the Savannah River. The river is dredged. They're actually trying to raise a bridge and expand the port down there and expand capacity. And they said it is the only port in the United States that does not have a particular type of crane. Every other port in the United States has this crane, and the Biden administration has become so concerned. The Biden administration has issued an executive order that all of these cranes have to be torn down. The Port of Savannah is the only one not affected in the United States. These cranes are built in China. And it turns out we've only just discovered, these cranes have been there for quite a while, by the way. They've been there for several years. And we've only just found out that these cranes have surveillance instruments in the cranes where they can scan the electronic signals from the ships coming into port and transmit back to mainland China the cargo that's on these ships from their manifests. As the signal are transmitted from the ship to port, these cranes intercept the signals, encrypted interception, and transmit back to China. So China is aware of every single thing coming in and out of our ports, the capacity of the ports, the capacity of the ships, where the ships have come from, where the ships are going to, all those sorts of things are being intercepted by China right now. The Biden administration has become so concerned, they've issued an order that all these things have to go away immediately. The only port not affected, Savannah. These cranes have been there in some cases for years, if not a decade. Also, the Chinese continue to buy land. Down in South Texas, they told me about a Chinese general. There was land for sale. It was about 100,000 acres in South Texas, and somehow a general in the Chinese military found the money to buy the land. And you know what he said he wanted to do? He wanted to buy windmills. He wanted to put up wind turbines. This land was right on the Texas-Mexico border and 10 miles from a major military installation. Surprise, surprise, surprise. 10 miles from a major military installation. What this Chinese general decided he wanted to do is he wanted to put up massive wind turbines. There's no wind on the land. Texas is big on wind energy, and they've mapped the state on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the most wind, 1 being the least amount of wind. This land rated a 2. But the land was flat, and the land was within 10 miles of a military installation. And if you put up the massive, massive windmills that the Chinese general wanted to put up. At the top of them, you could put signal surveillance, and it would reach to and could interfere with the signals at the base 10 miles away. They had to inform the state of Texas, which shut down the project. In Indiana, there's a Chinese agriculture company. And the Chinese agriculture company attempted to buy land on both sides of a railroad that is used to transport military hardware and oil. Wanted to buy the land on both sides. They had to go to the Illinois legislature and advise them of what was happening to kill the deal. In another state, the Chamber of Commerce in that state began lobbying against legislation that would have shut down Chinese business investment in the state. The Chamber of Commerce in the state lobbied against a bill that would shut down Chinese commerce. Turns out one of the businesses in China happened to be the big donor to the local Chamber of Commerce, and that company is listed by the Biden administration and before that the Trump administration as one of the biggest enablers of Chinese national security in the United States. That company was giving money to a Chamber of Commerce to lobby against legislation that would shut down Chinese investment in the state. The Chamber of Commerce was saying we're getting so much investment from Chinese businesses in the state, it's good for business. Turns out it was a national security scheme from China. The Chamber of Commerce couldn't be deterred, but the state legislature in the state, I think it was Ohio, shut it down. In fact, what Michael Lucci was telling me on stage is that there is bipartisan buy-in on this. This is not a partisan issue. The Democrats and Republicans around the country at the state level both concur China is engaging in acts of war in this country surreptitiously, and they got to be stopped. So I would call all of your attention to statearmor.org. They're only in 13 states right now, but they're expanding. This isn't an ad or anything with them. Look, I appreciate their sponsorship, but this was the most fascinating conversation we had. We're going to trot it out on the podcast as quickly as we can for y'all to be able to hear it. It was a spooky conversation. I could have talked to them for hours about it. The way Chinese military officials, public officials, and private citizens are buying land near American military bases and electing towers, whether in the form of windmills or communications arrays, to spy on what's happening in the military. And because the federal government is slow to respond, the state governments can move very quickly. State bureaucrats can move far quicker than federal bureaucrats in shutting this stuff down. Michael Lucci and Brian Cavanaugh were telling me one story about an interstate corridor in the country. I think it's I-25 is the corridor. And what was happening is the Chinese company Huawei agreed to put up cameras, weather cameras, so that media outlets and others could survey and figure out what the weather was going to be in remote parts of states. Maybe it was the I-15 corridor. Turns out that this corridor where Huawei was willing to put up their towers is also one of the most heavily trafficked military corridors in the country. And you know what Huawei was willing to do? Huawei was willing to put for free in its technology and its cameras, detection devices so you could see what was on the roads. You could see what's traveling. You had facial recognition, all this stuff built in for free. And guess what? Everything got transmitted back to China. When Robert O'Brien was Trump's military national security advisor, he charged Brian Cavanaugh, said, you get out there and you go, if you got to take a chainsaw, if you got to take welding tools, you tear down every single one of those towers and you do it immediately. They were gone by the end of the week. That's what Huawei did, though. Said, here, news media, we'll give you these traffic cameras for free with all these extra tools. Just put us up along the highway. That's what China's doing. It's been happening for a while, and thank goodness there's a bipartisan response here. It was a deeply troubling conversation, deeply troubling, but very informative, and there is hope. States are actually responding very rapidly to these threats, and all you got to do is get people to go into the states and inform the state legislatures of what's happening. And the state legislatures, on a bipartisan basis, respond very, very quickly. We need more of this. We need more. Statearmor.org is the website. You can go check them out. They're growing in states, and man, was it an interesting conversation. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. I need to play you one of the funniest moments from the gathering. So let me set the scene for you. We had people from 47 states there, every single radio market that I'm in. And y'all may not realize it, but I'm in like Salem, Oregon right now, and Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Tucson. We had a number of people from KRMG in Tulsa, WDBO in Orlando, WOKV in Jacksonville, other Cox stations, WGAU. We had a lot of people in every market, including WTIC and WICC up in Connecticut. We had people, in fact, one of the ones from Connecticut, it was a couple, and the man wanted me to know they hated my guts when I got on the radio station. But they kept listening, and now they love me. And they came to the gathering. They were great to meet them. But one of the funny moments was we had a guy from Canada there. And all the crowd could submit questions. I wove them into the conversation. This one I particularly wanted to call out because he's one of those snowbirds who stays in Florida for the winter and then drives back to Canada. And he wanted to know Ron DeSantis' thoughts on Justin Trudeau.
So all I can say is this. Justin Trudeau, since he has been Prime Minister of Canada, number of Stanley Cups for Canada, 0. Governor Ron DeSantis, number of Stanley Cups for the state of Florida since I've been governor, 3. Who's winning that battle?
Well played. Yeah, that was well played. It was a great line by Ron DeSantis there. It is remarkable. The entirety of the nation of Canada said no Stanley Cups in the last numbers. I still can't believe that Florida even has hockey teams. It's a sign of the amount of snowbirds who fly down to Florida and just have stayed, all the Yankees moving to Florida. And now they all drive north on I-95 and 75 through Georgia, wrecking absolute havoc on our traffic. Nonetheless. All right. I got to move on. I got to meet one of the guys in charge of Old Glory Bank at the gathering. He and his wife came. Super people. Very, very nice. And I love those guys at that bank. It's a conservative bank. It's by conservatives for conservatives. In fact, I mentioned on stage even that they are so concerned about progressives buying up stock in banks and forcing the left-wing agenda on banks that they were concerned enough that they decided to find a different way to find investors to invest in the bank. And I became one of them. I used the bank before I invested in the bank. I used the bank before I advertised for the bank. I just love them. OldGloryBank.com. You can go get an account with them. They've got no fee checking, no fee savings. They've got incredible apps. They've found a way for you to be able to deposit cash into your online bank account. They're highly innovative. They do mortgages and other loans. They've got business checking. You're not going to get canceled if you're a gun store and you need a business to do business with, a bank to do business with. Consider Old Glory Bank. They were started because of the cancellation trend in banks, particularly for gun owners. Great bank. OldGloryBank.com. OldGloryBank.com. Get an account in less than 8 minutes. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. We're monitoring this story right now. Israel has put its military on high alert. And also, the Navy is rushing ships into the area as quickly as possible. A guided missile submarine and a second aircraft carrier. The USS Georgia is the submarine headed in. You got the aircraft carrier going. There was already one there. Intelligence reports expect that Iran will begin launching its attack before Thursday, before hostage negotiations resume. It's an escalating situation there. Could be the outbreak of a regional war. We will see. It looks like they're coordinated a response with Hezbollah. So stay tuned as these things continue to progress. I want to talk a little bit about, well, the ongoing woke insanity in corporate America. One of the conversations that came up at the gathering was the Securities and Exchange Commission expanding its mission beyond the scope of its mandate from Congress that essentially incentivizes progressivism within corporations. And some corporations don't need all that much help. As you know, I fly on Delta Airlines. I pretty much fly exclusively on Delta. I can't remember the last time I flew on an airline other than Delta. And I actually like the airline. Have a lot of listeners who are Delta employees. And the thing about flying is it's science. It's physics. The shape of a wing, the air over the wing has to move faster than the air under the wing as the plane moves. That causes lift. Flaps are then deployed to redirect the airflow to tilt the nose of the plane up, and the plane can fly. It's actually fascinating. And what's so fascinating about it is in human perspective, it was less than 60 years from the Wright brothers to us going to outer space. In less than 100 years from Orville and Wilbur Wright taking off at Kitty Hawk, we landed a man safely on the moon and brought him back to Earth. It's incredible. Mankind has left the solar system with Voyager. Flight and rocketry, it's amazing. But I worry about companies that are foundationally companies based in physics, which Delta Airlines is. It's a company that flies planes for a living and resorts to the woke madness of the era. A video has come out of a Zoom call of the chief diversity officer of Delta Airlines. Listen to this.
But the other more subtle forms of communications, I would call them the little c communications. They might even be verbal communications. So we're beginning to take a hard look at things like our gatehouse announcements. You know, we welcome ladies and gentlemen, and we've asked ourselves, is that as gender inclusive as we want to be? You know, we're looking at some legacy language that exists in some of our employee manuals and getting to the root of the way some things are described and saying, does that actually send a message of inclusivity? So I think,
ladies and gentlemen, if you can't say ladies and gentlemen because it's not inclusive enough, you're broken. You're broken. The chief diversity officer at Delta says the company is wondering whether or not it's inclusive enough to say ladies and gentlemen. It's good manners. It's politeness. I forget who said it now, and it drives me crazy that I forget who said it. But there is a great quote out there that good manners is the social lubrication that makes a society function. It's why you be nice to people who aren't nice to you. It's why political opponents still call each other and congratulate each other, even though they lost and they hate each other guts. It's the social lubrication that keeps society functioning. Ladies and gentlemen is good manners. And you'll note that the only people who are angry about ladies and gentlemen are the angriest people in the trans community. And they are not even 0.1% of the population. That a company as massive as Delta Airlines, one of the largest air carriers in the world, will turn itself upside down and inside out to placate less than 0.1% of people who might be offended by ladies and gentlemen, as opposed to the tried and the true use of good manners, is a damning indictment on the culture of the company, frankly. And this isn't the first time. I mean, Delta, of course, has lobbied against the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and other things like that. Look, I respect the CEO. I respect the company. I use them on a regular basis. They're a good company. I'm a million miler on Delta as of a month or two ago. But the political correctness, I mean, during the month of June, all the employees get to wear their pride symbols and stuff. God forbid they're wearing stuff to celebrate Jesus or their Star of David. Heard the other day somebody got in trouble finally for wearing a pro-Palestinian thing. A Jewish customer complained and they cut that out. But the level of wokeism within the Fortune 500, the fact that you're worried about inclusivity and the use of the phrase ladies and gentlemen, that actually is nuts. That is actually overeducated nonsense to have a chief diversity officer worried about ladies and gentlemen. That there are people in the country who are offended by that. They are not just the minority, they're the angry people. This isn't about inclusion. It's about succumbing to the bullying of a rabid mob. And that Delta would even consider succumbing to the bullying of a rabid mob of less than 0.1% of the population is a warning sign for that company. Because if you fold to the one madness, you will fold to the next madness, and you will fold to the next madness. And this is the beginning of the madness, not the end of the madness. So to the extent that they would even have the audacity to think that ladies and gentlemen needs to be dropped from the gatehouse where they make their announcement, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to begin boarding. It's kind of a troubling sign that a company that would actually ultimately be based on the physics of flying would embrace the anti-science moral panic of the day from the angry mob of transgender activists. I mean, y'all, come on. Ladies and gentlemen is a tried and true effort to good manners. What are they going to do? Folks, y'all, now it is Delta. They are from Georgia. They can say, y'all, we're about to get ready to do this. All y'all, we're going to do this. Folks, spelled with an X so that we can be politically correct. Folks with an X. That's how we're saying it, folks. Read the X. It's not a K. Or just, ladies and gentlemen, it's tried and true. It's good manners. And there's no need to placate the angry, small minority of people in the name of gender inclusion. Delta, I don't know if you know this or not, but there actually are only two genders, male and female. Anyone who says otherwise is nuts. Why are you giving the nuts the heckler's veto over your business? Now, I'll shift gears now that I got that off my chest. The Navy's ability to build lower-cost warships that can shoot down Houthi rebel missiles in the Red Sea depends in part on a 25-year-old laborer who previously made parts for garbage trucks. Lucas Andriani, a welder in Fincartieri Marionette Marine in Marionette, Wisconsin, is among thousands of young workers who have received employer-sponsored training nationwide as shipyards struggle to hire and retain employees. The labor shortage is one of myriad challenges that has led to backlogs in ship production and maintenance at a time when the Navy faces expanding global threats. Combined with shifting defense priorities, last-minute design changes, and cost overruns, it's put the U.S. behind China in the number of ships at its disposal, and the gap is widening. Navy shipbuilding is currently in a terrible state, the worst in a quarter century, says Eric Labs, a longtime naval analyst at the Congressional Budget Office. I feel alarmed, he said. I don't see a fast, easy way to get out of this problem. It's taken us a long time to get into it. Marionette Marine is under contract to build 6 guided missile frigates, the Navy's newest surface warships, with options to build 4 more. But it only has enough workers to produce 1 frigate a year. One of the problems is the struggle to hire and retain laborers for the challenging work of building new ships as gray veterans retire, taking decades of experience with them. This is from ABC News. This comes as the Navy is sending a 2nd aircraft carrier group and a submarine into the Middle East. We're falling behind the Chinese. There's actually now recruiting ads for the shipbuilding industry, actual recruiting ads for the shipbuilding industry. Not only that, there's an early warning indicator that we're slipping into recession in that hourly work is dropping. People are actually dropping hourly workers in the economy right now, so the number of unemployed people is going up. Maybe we need to move them up to Wisconsin to build ships because many of them don't want to go to the cold weather. They should want to go for a fine Miller Lite, but not the cold weather. Sell them on the Miller Lights and the Green Bay Packers, and they might want to move to Wisconsin otherwise. I don't know. We got problems economically in this country. The Wall Street Journal has a story out today. Child care rent insurance, where inflation hits hardest now. The big fixed costs in our life are tough to avoid, and they're the ones causing people all sorts of problems with inflation. Water, sewer, trash collection prices are up. Food and beverages are up. Costs of shelter are up. Costs of services are up. Costs of insurance up. The things we can't live without. I don't know if you know this or not, but if you own a car in this country, you're required to have insurance on it. Car insurance has skyrocketed. Insurance for your home has skyrocketed. And in the meantime, it is causing us problems with building ships for our Navy. Both the weird economy we're in and also the costs that are skyrocketing, we're having trouble keeping up. The Chinese are kicking our butt in ship production right now. We don't have enough people. Now, they're starting to run out of people in China, but they still have enough. They still got 1 billion people to be able to do this, some of them forced labor, no less. Now, the Chinese ships aren't all that great, just so you understand. They had their flagship aircraft carrier. Not only did it catch on fire, it broke in half. Like on the sea, it broke in half. There's a problem there, clearly. We make better ships. We just make far fewer of them, and we need more of them, particularly if a war is coming. Meanwhile, we're having to deploy them into the Middle East as the situation heats up there with Israel. And the situation heating up with Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran, we're going to become targets. Remember, the Iranians blamed the United States for the attack inside Iran that killed the Hamas leader. We know we're going to be targeted. We know we're going to be targeted. We have so many things to fix in this country. If only we had a presidential candidate who could articulate those things and stay focused on that message. Oh, what a world it would be if we could do that. Now, before I get out of here, I mentioned the quote about good manners being the social lubrication. I am told by various emailers it's Robert Heinlein, or it's Leon Trotsky, or it's Jane Austen, or it's someone else. So it's Heinlein, it's Jane Austen, or it's Trotsky. It actually appears to be a Heinlein quote that Jane Austen actually wrote that maybe Trotsky parroted as well, in an amalgamation of all these people. It's still a good observation that good manners is the lubrication that keeps our society running. So maybe we shouldn't give up our good manners and our ladies and gentlemen being polite in favor of the mob. One of the great organizations that stands up to the mob in education and indoctrination is Hillsdale College. They would sure love to have your support, and I'd love for you to support them. EricForHillsdale.com. It's a tax-deductible donation. You can get him Primus from Hillsdale College and so much more. You can take free courses on the Constitution, but also you can support their effort to expand classical education through the K through 12 level. It's completely donor supported. They got to have donors to do this. They've built a program for K through 12 for charter schools, public schools, private schools, and homeschools. It's a brilliant program, and I would absolutely love for you to support them at Eric, E-R-I-C-K, EricForHillsdale.com. If you go to EricForHillsdale.com, you can find out more. You can find their donation portal to make a tax-deductible donation. You can find out about their mission to educate, not indoctrinate, the future of America, the K through 12 level, and of course the collegiate level with fantastic Hillsdale College. So go check them out today, EricForHillsdale.com. Support Hillsdale College with me, and we can shape the minds of a better tomorrow here in the country. Hey, I don't care where you are in the nation. I want to see if you might do a favor for me and offer up a prayer for the football team at Rome High School in Rome, Georgia. Rome High School was in a match, and on their way home, the players were on the bus, and a 21-year-old who was drunk crossed the center lane, hit the bus head on. The bus, rolled 3 or 4 times, going about 60 miles an hour. None of the players were killed, thank God, or seriously injured, but head trauma and things like that on the school bus. So if you would please offer up prayers for the Rome High School in Rome, Georgia, for their football team. All of those players now recovering from a crashed. They were on the school bus when a drunk driver hit the bus. Appreciate that. Now, I want to close out here with Mike Pence. Mike Pence came to the gathering. He's a longtime friend of mine. I've known Mike Pence for 20 years or so. And Pence, I asked him about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. He had not spoken publicly about it. And this is some of what he said.
Now, I should mention, because this is my first time in a public forum to address it, I thank God that President Donald Trump was spared in Butler, Pennsylvania. Karen and I, we were in a plane. We just landed, and I got a text from someone watching it in real time. It took my breath away when I heard of the shot had come from 150 yards away, having lived with Secret Service for 4 years. I couldn't believe it. But I also knew that while the president had stood, and I truly do, I wasn't surprised, but I truly admired the way the president stood up and raised his fist and walked off that stage. But I just reached over on that airplane, I grabbed Karen's hand, and I said, we're going to pray right now. Because while they were reporting that he had gotten off safe, I knew Reagan didn't know he was shot when they put him in the limo. And we just prayed earnestly, and we urged people around the country to pray. And I understand that shaped the environment going into the development of the platform, which would be minted a couple days later. But, you know, I have to tell you that the fact that we have a platform that removed 50 years of pro-life language, made no mention of the national debt, advocated massive taxes at our borders, and abandoning commitments that we have to allies around the world was deeply troubling to me and deeply disappointing.
That's Mike Pence. Wide-ranging discussion with him on stage. I appreciate his comments and the newsworthiness. He made clear he's staying out of the 2024 race in large part because he thinks those on the right who care about issues need to speak plainly, truthfully, and lovingly to the Trump campaign. Now, we've been overwhelmed with calls today from people saying, how do I do that? Because I'm concerned. I want to tell him to focus. Well, you can add him on Twitter. He's back on Twitter as of today. His campaign may pay attention to that. But honestly, find your local Republican Party, your state party. Call your Georgia party, your Texas party, your California Republican Party. Express your concerns that Trump's off message. Oh, they'll be relaying those to the campaign. You trust me. Call the RNC. He needs to focus. He needs to rest and reset, just like the first caller on the show today said.